Welcome to Getting Started With, where our job is to make your job easier. In this episode, we're getting started with interviewing. In this video, you'll learn answers to what an audit interview is and how it differs from other types of interviews, why interviews are important in the planning, performing, and even reporting phases of an audit engagement, and how to prepare for and conduct successful interviews. So, let's get started. What is an audit interview? We've all seen or experienced interviews. I'm sure you've seen a person interviewed for a television news program. You've probably been in a job interview where someone was assessing your skills and experience. An audit interview is very similar. The goal is to learn information about the subject of an assurance or consulting engagement. Why do we perform audit interviews? Interviews are critical to identifying information, which is fundamental to what we do. Standard 2310, identifying information states, internal auditors must identify sufficient, reliable, and useful information to achieve the engagement's objective. Okay, so who do we interview? During the audit engagement, you might interview a member of management with responsibility for the subject being audited, or frontline employees with key roles in processes, or external stakeholders with an interest in the outcomes, or others. What are the objectives for an interview? Objectives of an audit interview can vary depending on what part of an engagement the auditor is in. In the engagement planning stage, the goal is to learn as much as possible about the program or process. This information helps set the audit objectives. These interviews tend to be more open-ended, and as such, questions should be crafted to gather as much information as possible. You may also want to identify any concerns about the process or program and its intended outcomes. In the fieldwork stage, your questions will be more focused, and you will learn about nuances of the processes you are auditing. Your questions may be related to exceptions you note as part of your testing. New information will inevitably pop up, so make sure to slow down and reaffirm your understanding of the process. Your mindset must shift from understanding the process to understanding if each item you've sampled followed this process. And finally, the reporting stage. While most audit interviews will be performed during the planning and performing stages, some opportunities may present themselves in the reporting stage. For example, interviews in the reporting stage can help determine the cause of a finding or clarify the effect or other aspects of conclusions you have drawn. Why is this important? As the auditor, you must be prepared to discuss the work that was performed to draw the conclusion, such as criteria and condition. It may also be helpful to discuss the recommendations to get management input on the feasibility of potential solutions. Okay, so now let's discuss preparing for the interview. Here's a pro tip. Review related materials ahead of time so you go into the interview prepared and knowledgeable on the topic. Here are some potential sources: prior audit files, interview write-ups, websites, and other documentation such as flowcharts or procedures. When conducting an interview during the planning stage, listen carefully for any additional forms or documentation an interviewee may mention. Ask for an example and add it to your work files. This helps develop testing steps during the performing portion of the audit. Being prepared is critical to any interview, but a successful interview also depends on effective communication skills. Communication is undoubtedly one of the most important soft skills for an auditor, but it is especially important to the interviewing component of an engagement, particularly when it comes to active listening skills. The difference between hearing and listening is the ability to take in, process, and analyze what you hear on the spot. This enables you to form follow-up questions and draw conclusions on what you're being told in the moment. It's easier than you think. This skill also helps reduce assessment errors later in the engagement and the need for follow-up conversations. However, you should always leave an interview with the understanding that you may have to come back to clarify points or to gather additional information. Of course, you will want to minimize return visits out of respect for the auditee's time. Here are some additional tips for successful interviews. Begin the interview with open-ended questions to gather as much information as possible. Formulate follow-up questions in real time as the interview progresses. That's part of active listening as well. Close the interview with some summary questions to ensure you heard and captured everything adequately. What's a summary question? Something like, you told me a lot about this process. Is there anything we didn't cover? Of course, you should be friendly and build rapport with your subject to ensure you draw out all the necessary information. However, the interviewee is the subject matter expert, so your best listening skills should be employed. While this is a conversation, you should do less talking, except to clarify and confirm what you are hearing. Here's something you probably know but may not have considered. A significant portion of communication occurs outside the verbal words said by the interviewer and the interviewee. Communication includes body language and other nonverbal cues. However, in today's environment, it is common for employees to work from home, and meeting in person may not always be easy or convenient. Therefore, you should always be prepared to conduct interviews in a virtual environment and consider what additional challenges that poses. For example, the ability to read body language cues could be hindered in a virtual environment if the camera isn't turned on. Some tips for circumventing this concern include: be flexible, allow plenty of time in the audit process to accommodate the need to cancel, reschedule, or continue an audit interview at another date or time. Request in advance that the interviewee attend the interview on camera. There may be many reasons an individual working remotely may not want to be on camera during a meeting, but making that request in advance lowers the chances the individual will assume it will be okay to not be on camera. Establish a set amount of time for the interview so the individual can prepare in advance. This helps mitigate the risk of unexpected interruptions. Request in advance that the interviewee be prepared to screen share any systems or other pertinent documents that may need to be referenced during the interview. Documenting interviews is essential to the process and is mandatory per Standard 2330, Documenting Information. It states, internal auditors must document sufficient, reliable, relevant, and useful information to support the engagement results and conclusions. It is best to document interviews as soon as possible after they occur, when the details are fresh in your mind. The most common type of evidence for an interview is a documented summary of the conversation and key points made by the auditee. However, other effective methods may be used. Process walkthroughs, tours, or observations can be documented in a process flowchart. Various formats for flowcharting exist. Employ the version that best represents the attributes of the process being audited. When documenting the source for an interview, make sure to include the title of the person. Employees and managers come and go, and a future auditor may need to follow up with a new person. Having a title helps. Ask interviewees to review a brief interview summary or draft process flowchart to ensure you captured correctly what you saw and heard. Congratulations on completing Getting Started with Interviewing. Thank you for watching. There's so much more to learn. On the following screen, you'll see links to suggested videos to view next. If there's a subject you'd like to learn more about, leave your suggestion in the comments below.